if you can show them the viability of another option, the Libertarian Party doesn't become the third party. It becomes the second party in those states.
Yeah, fair enough.
And the party that right now is shunned in those states becomes the third party.
Yeah.
And so nationally, sure, you have three parties that are like competing for interests. But in the states, you have two. In 38 states, you have two. You have either the Republicans and Libertarians or the Democrats and Libertarians.
Hey guys, it's an election season. St. George City elections are the most important thing. We want you to go to votestg.com and find out who's running and what they stand for. See us all over Southern Utah in our voter information booth. We'll be at Digby's Market, Red Rock Bicycles, and the park. We'll see you out there. Hey everybody, thanks for tuning back into the 435 podcast. We have another great in the running candidate. This one's Brad Green. He's running for District 2 in Utah for the United States Congress. We had a great episode. We talked about the fundamentals of the Libertarian Party so that you can get educated on who they are and what they stand for. Specifically about him, though, what are his big three things that he wants to take? He wants to repeal the 16th Amendment and eliminating the income tax. He wants to protect public lands.
We talked about ensuring that we have co-equal branches of government through separation of powers.
You're better
by
at this.
Wielding the purse strings.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Make sure you go to bradgreen4utah.com. Donate to his campaign, subscribe to him on social medias, definitely get involved. We want you to pick principle over party, look at the issues, find the candidate that represents you the best, and get out there and vote. For local elections, your ballot's in the mail. St. George City is ready to vote, but same with every other city in the county.
Some of them are arriving already. Some of my friends have already sent them back.
I got mine yesterday. So votestg.com to find out all the candidates. I also have information about Brad, his website there. So votestg.com, and you can go to the District 2 seat. See you out there, guys. Enjoy the episode. I think we're rolling. We're good. Okay. So yeah, I wanted to make sure that I try to get as balanced of a viewpoint as I can. I want to try to attract as many viewers. You know, somebody might watch something that they might not normally do, but
that's a unique approach. Like, there's a lot of people that are doing interviews or podcasts, and they're kind of sticking to their wheelhouse. You know,
yeah.
They're Republicans. They're interviewing the Republicans. They're independents. They're doing only the independents and third parties, and
or they split them, right? Where there's like one personality that is like the liberal personality, and then there's one personality that's like the conservative personality, and then it's kind of like this tag team approach. And so, maybe it's tough to do it as one person, but I feel like I could play. I like playing both sides of any issue. It's one of those things that helps me learn. Like if I can learn the other person's argument, it'll help me kind of clarify my own perspective on it.
Sure.
So I don't know. We'll see how it goes. It's slow going for now, but I think we're building a pretty good, consistent following. I'm getting a lot of returning viewers, so like listeners. So we're getting a lot of repeats. Okay. So once they've hit here once, then they keep coming back. And we're hitting YouTube and the podcast. So the podcast downloads, I think we've done really well on, considering there's not really a whole lot of retargeting. It's kind of like you either go there or you don't go there. You know what I mean? Yeah, yep. So we're YouTube. If they're on YouTube, they're going to see shorts and clips and things like that they might click on. But
do you share across social media networks? Like, are you on
Instagram? Yeah.
And TikTok?
Yeah. We got a TikTok page, and it's something that's, because I can't get in and I can't get into it. I have a hard time with social media already as it is, because I just get sucked in. I'm a consumer. Sure. And so I try to stick it out. But Blueform Media, they do a great job helping me with they post on the TikTok page and Facebook and Instagram. Those are like the main places we've kind of focused on for now.
All right.
So yeah.
Well, I mean, Instagram and TikTok, they have kind of this problem where you don't really get long format, like,
right.
And what you do, I mean, I've looked at a couple of the videos that you did, trying to just understand who the heck you were and what was going on. It's a little more long format. It's not talk radio, drive time talk radio, but it's definitely more than the 90-second TikTok video, that you can add music and get viral on.
Yeah. And some of the stuff, like, there's, when you talk to somebody for 2 hours, you're bound to get some good clips of like, a 10-second, hey, this this thing was said, right? So
Sure.
some of that stuff gets some traction, but even the algorithm, like dealing with the algorithms, like sometimes, we'll get some posts that'll have, 20 views total, and then some that'll hit, 2,500, right? So it's just like you're playing with a computer system at that stage. So it's consistency.
That's exactly what it is. Like when I started a TikTok account, so I have a social media guy that ran Mike Lee's social media campaign when he first got elected in 2010.
Mm-hmm.
And he was like, look, you need to start social media campaign, just be there, engaging with people, creating friendships, relationships, whatever. And I didn't have any idea how TikTok worked. Like I didn't realize it was like the scroll and the video, and you were trying to loop it so that people would watch it again. Like
right.
This whole stuff. And I saw a meme. It was just some guy holding the flag, and it said, I'm so patriotic, I piss red, white, and blue. My doctor says it might be prostate cancer, but I told him to shut his commie mouth.
Nice.
And I just shared that.
Yeah.
On TikTok, just thinking it was funny. It was like Facebook, right? Because I'm not a boomer quite, but
yeah,
I'm old enough that
Gen
Facebook
X
is my thing. And it got like 2,000 views. And I was like, what? How does this? And then I started creating videos and they're getting like 200, 90.
Yeah.
And I was just like, this is weird. Like, why would that silly meme get so much traction? It's just because it counts as a view. Somebody scrolled past it and then somebody laughed and they shared it. Somebody stitched it.
And then even like with TikTok, which is crazy, is it's reading your facial recognition. It's reading how long you're looking at a specific thing, and then it's adjusting, and then it's interest based. The algorithm's interest-based algorithm, not necessarily a social network, right? So Facebook and Instagram have your social connections, right? So it's like if we were friends and then you're friends with somebody I'm friends with and we both like it, then they might like it too, right? So it kind of goes based off the person. But real quickly, I think what TikTok mastered was it's based off what that individual person wants, not necessarily because we could probably have friends that are in completely different spectrums of life, right? And so the power of what you're interested in. And so as you're scrolling, it feeds you more of what you clearly like. So when you're smiling, it knows you're smiling. You don't have to like it. It's tracking you already as it is. And I think that's probably what scares a lot of people, is that it's like this thing knows me better, or knows me, is almost inside my head, right? And I can see how there's some fear around that, but it's addictive. It's very addictive. But so thinking about, I'm super glad you came on, and I'm really excited to see how your campaign goes and how you can start taking. I'm in real estate, so we talk about market share, right? The share of the voter market. The Republican Party, in my personal opinion, seems like it's in shambles. You have one singular strong candidate, and then you have this just fractured group where you think they'd be stronger than ever, after almost a decade of Obama. Then you have this little snippet with Trump, and then you have another, post-Obama administration, right, with Biden. You'd think the Republicans would have solidified themselves, but they haven't. They've done nothing to that. So maybe for people that have maybe never even looked at what the Libertarian platform is, maybe give us a breakdown of like, hey, what's the platform that the Libertarian Party, at least in Utah, what's the foundation of it?
All right, so I'm going to give you a little bit of backstory about my perspective, because I think it's going to matter.
Okay.
For years and years, I was in Republican Party leadership.
Okay.
So I entered the Republican Party leadership back in 2007.
Okay.
And at the time, the Republican Party had some really disconnected candidates as well. Obama ended up winning that election.
Right.
But at the time in Utah specifically, there was kind of the establishment Republicans that were saying, hey, look, McCain is our guy.
Mm-hmm.
And then you had the grassroots that were like, McCain is like authoritarian, big government. Like the Democrats may actually be onto something when they're calling him a fascist. Like legitimately, he's not a great candidate. Mm-hmm. And then we had Ron Paul running in the race, and everybody was like, wow, this guy has great principles, but he's also libertarian, and he thinks that we should not be like having hundreds of thousands of troops all over the world, peacekeeping for other countries.
Yeah, they almost saw him as weak. They almost saw it as like a weakness, which is crazy to me.
Yeah.
Like if anybody knows anything about Ron Paul, a weakness is not be a characteristic.
It was funny. Somebody asked him, they said, hey, look, you're kind of old. And is that going to be a factor in this race?
Gosh.
And it was funny because they asked Ronald Reagan the same thing, and he was like, "Look, I will not let the amateurish and juvenile nature of my opponents detract from the race." So Ron Paul was like, "Hey, does anybody want to have a bike race?
Yeah.
Or a marathon?
Yeah.
Like, I challenge you to any kind of physical challenge.
Yeah.
Let's see who's the best at this." Anyway, and then you had Rudy Giuliani, who at the time was like America's mayor. He had all of his fame and glory behind him.
Wow, which is so crazy to me too, knowing the history of like how he came up in New York DA, and like, oh my gosh, his history is riddled with skeletons in that closet. Anyway,
so that was the election in 2008.
That was it. Yeah.
And I just had learned about the caucus convention system that the Republican Party uses. It is like, it's like textbook republicanism. And when I say republicanism, I don't mean capital R. I mean Article 4, Section 4 of the Constitution. We guarantee a Republican form of government, which is like this tiered representation where you have specialization of political interest, essentially. You have neighborhoods gathering together to pick a candidate that they trust, so on and so forth. And so
it requires participation.
Absolutely.
If you don't participate,
if you don't.
It fails if you don't. And then it slides into this. Oh, we can have this. We'll just slip into general democracy where every single vote gets just one weighted vote, and that's not how it was organized. That's not how it was built up. Right.
Right.
So keep going.
So all right. So I joined the Republican Party. We went through the Great Recession. I changed my business outlook on life. I went from trying to be entrepreneurial on my own to going back to working for somebody. And then I went into an entrepreneurial venture with a bunch of partners, and that's worked out really well. But for me, I stayed kind of in politics, kind of involved. I was a delegate in the Republican Party. I would run for county party office. In 2017, I ran for secretary of the Iron County Republican Party. And immediately after getting in as secretary, and that's a backstory that takes a few minutes to explain, so I won't, but immediately after getting in, they said, okay, well, the secretary is in charge of our sole fundraiser. We do one fundraiser a year. We call it the Lincoln Day Dinner. You're in charge. And I said, okay, how much money do we need to raise at this fundraiser? And they said, well, it costs us about $2,000 to run the county party every year. And we normally spend about $2,000 putting on the Lincoln Day Dinner. So if you could raise $4,000 to cover the next 2 years or whatever, that'd be good enough. And I was like, seriously, it's going to take so much time. I'm going to do that for $4,000. Maybe I should just write a check and like move on with my life.
Yeah.
And they were like, well, what do you have in mind? I'm like, let's bring somebody big in. Let's make it like a splash. And they were like, good luck. Like, who do you have in mind? And I was like, I don't know. I think I have a connection with Ron Paul from when he ran for president because we did a fundraiser for him in 2008. Yeah. And so I reached out and he agreed.
Nice.
And we brought Ron Paul. We had to fly him direct into Cedar City in a private jet that had a bathroom and could make it from Lake Jackson, Texas in one stop or without, in nonstop. So it was a huge event. And I was always called a libertarian in the Republican Party because I want a government, specifically a federal government. I want government small enough to fit inside the Constitution. Mm-hmm. And they're like, oh, you're a libertarian. You want limited government. And I'm like, well, it's in the Republican Party platform. Why don't you want that too? Bringing out Ron Paul really solidified the fact to the other Republicans that I was a libertarian because he has been a lifelong libertarian. He paid you with an ounce of gold. You can pay for lifelong membership in the Libertarian Party.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that. That's
otherwise cool. You have dues. It's like $20 a year or something. So it was funny because people were registering for tables and seats for this dinner from 5 states. Like they wanted to come see Ron Paul. They would drive 6 hours to see Ron Paul for a $100 meal. But none of the establishment politicians in Iron County had bought a ticket. None of the mayors, not our state senator, not our state house representative.
Wow.
None of them had bought tickets. And I only had 400 tickets. And I had sold about 250, and I still didn't have any of our representation that had bought a ticket. And I had gone to the Levitts because they had a private jet, and I was asking them if I could use their jet to pick up Ron Paul. And they're like, absolutely, we're not interested in helping with this event. And I was like, what do you mean? Like, you guys are – Mike Levitt was a Republican governor. Like, come on. And they were like, no, we're not interested. And then all of a sudden, I got my phone rang one day, and I answered it. And he said, hey, Brad, this is Mitt Romney. And,
oh, wow.
And I don't know if you know this, but I'm running for Senate. And I would like to come to this event that you're hosting Do you still have any tables maybe up front? Could I have like a sponsorship? Could I be in your, the sponsorship in your agenda or whatever? Like, can I have my name there?
Yeah.
And I was like, sure. I mean, I'm happy to take your money. Let's get you in here. We'll get you. And I had bought 2 tables trying to make sure the event made sense. My company had purchased the 2 front tables.
Yeah.
And then to really pay for Ron Paul's speaking fee, I had gotten Dave Bateman, who was fighting in the Republican Party to basically save the Republican Party's caucus convention system at the time. He was a platinum sponsor. He put up a whole bunch of money to be able to make the event actually get started. And so I moved one of my tables over and allowed Mitt Romney to be front and center, and he paid a premium for that because he came in late. Well, as soon as he had booked and announced he was coming to the event,
all of a sudden,
all of the other tables sold to those that are in the what I would call kind of establishment or elitist class of politics.
Surprise.
And it was funny. Mitt Romney, this is a segue, but Mitt Romney said, Brad, I don't know if you know that, but Ron Paul and I are really close friends.
Interesting.
And I was like, no, you're not. There's no way that's a thing.
That can't be a thing.
And he goes, no, seriously, on the campaign trail for president in 2000 and what did it been, 2008? Maybe 2012. Because they were both on the campaign stage in 2012 too. That's probably more realistic.
Yeah. 12.
Anyway, he says on the campaign trail, everybody hated us. They hated Ron Paul because he was a libertarian, and they hated Mitt Romney because he was a Mormon.
Yeah.
And so he's like, we were the outcasts, and so we hung out together and got to know each other, and we have vastly different principles in politics, but we liked each other.
Yeah, but so did Adams and Jefferson. They hated each other. They didn't agree. They didn't even hate each other. They respected each other, but they had civil discourse about the things they disagreed with, which was
a little incivil as well.
And incivil, but that's what made it like an effective relationship, right?
So
they died on the same day. Did you know that?
Same story. I did know that. Yeah,
that's crazy. July 4th. They died on the 4th of July. That's crazy.
Like 20 miles apart.
That's so amazing. That's amazing.
So Ron Paul verified with me when he landed and we got in the Lincoln Navigator together on the way to the college. He was like, "Hey, you knew that Mitt Romney and I are friends, right?" And I'm like,
"Sure."
Mitt Romney told me that, and he explained the whole story. He's like, "I don't understand what it is with the Mormons, but they always buy all the products I'm selling because I'm selling like prepper stuff." And I'm like, "Well, let me tell you about Mormon preppers." Anyway. So that was a fun segue. Sorry. So I was in the Republican Party leadership for a while. And with the success of that event, I was kind of a big name in the Republican Party. Nobody outside of Iron County. But in Iron County, Utah, they were like, wow, there's this up-and-coming guy. He owns a business. He has money. He can throw around a little bit. He can put on a really big event. The Republican Party in Iron County is still spending that money.
Oh, nice. Okay. That's good. You
like
did it
6 years later.
You nailed it.
And good job.
Good job, Brad.
Cherry on top, right? So 2 years later, there was this big fight in the state central committee, and a guy was going to run for county commissioner, and he was on the state central committee, and he said, I can't run for county commissioner and be a city councilman and be involved in this fight in the Republican Party. I can't do all of them. So he resigned. And they said, okay, we need to appoint somebody to the state central committee in the Republican Party. Brad Green's the up-and-coming guy. He's the secretary of the party. Let's appoint him. We can replace the secretary every day. No problem. So I went to the state central committee of the Republican Party, and I had those fights. I was actually the 51st member of the infamous Gang of 51. I don't know if you remember the SB 54 battles of like 2018, 2019. Nope. And we had some really interesting civil discourse and disagreement in the Republican Party trying to have the Republican Party grapple with the dysfunction that resulted from legislative kind of takeover of their primary process. And the following year, they reorganized every 2 years, they redo the governing bodies of the Republican Party, including the state central committee. And I got elected on the audit committee, and then they elected me in that committee as the chairman of the audit committee of the state Republican Party. And so I was on the executive committee. I was in the state central committee, and I was heavily involved in politics, fielding candidates in Iron County. And what I discovered was that the state Republican Party was severely broken. In 2 years of meetings, executive committee meetings, only one time did they have enough people to the meeting to actually conduct business. They did not have a quorum for 23 of 24 meetings. And as the audit committee chairman, I recognized that they were bouncing their checkbook nearly every month.
And this is
multiple
what year?
Times. This is 2019, 2020.
This is crazy. Okay. All right.
And they bounced their rent check all the time.
Wow.
This is the party that everybody says runs the state. Yeah. Right? Like everybody's like, yeah, the Republican Party runs everything. I mean, 80% of our House and Senate in the state are Republicans. But the Republican Party itself has basically been used as a rubber stamp on politicians that have sway. And they don't care about the Republican Party's principles, many of them, some do. Realistically, what they want is the Republican Party stamp of approval on their campaign, because the people that aren't involved, that aren't being informed, that aren't reaching out and getting the information, they're just like, well, he's a Republican. The Democrats, at least at the national stage, are crazy. I'm going to vote for the Republican because that's the only real option.
Yeah,
and so the Republican Party brand
think that's
is all
who's going to win
matters.
anyway. They think they're like, well, I don't want to vote for somebody that's not going to win, right? So they just go along party lines.
And so it's become a horse race. Mm-hmm. Which horse is going to win? It's the Republicans. And so we are what nationally they call a one-party state, generally speaking. There's 38 states that are in similar plight. More than half are Republican, some are Democrat. Well, so in 2021, I saw how the legislature had continued to slide up the election deadlines, so that what makes the Republican Party's process beautiful, which is vetting candidates and specialization of delegates, it's almost like Jefferson's ward system.
Yeah.
So that's what makes that's what has historically made the Republican Party effective at fielding good candidates. It's basically been broken because the delegates now don't have time to vet candidates. Mm-hmm. And they don't really have a real good vetting process, and they're not really specializing in it. Basically, people are showing up to caucus night, and that's always been a bit of a popularity contest. But because there aren't a bunch of neighborhoods actually involved, they don't know how their neighbors think about politics. They don't know how they don't know their neighbors' values, because we don't interact with each other. And
I'll tell you this experience I had.
Go ahead.
So the special election, right? It was a scramble as a Republican. And I moved here from California in 2015, and I was a registered independent in California. And I moved here, I was still an independent. And then I realized, I was like, oh, I can't vote in Republican primaries as an independent. It's like, well, I guess I'll change it. I'll sign up to be a Republican, I guess. So I'm registered
because rarely is, especially in rural Utah, rarely is there a Democrat that's really expecting to win running.
Exactly.
So the whole battle for quality candidates generally has happened in the Republican primary.
And so that's where I registered. So then, come the special election, I was like, well, I'm definitely, because I had already made a conscious thought that this is what we're going to do this year. Municipal elections, 3 seats in every city. It's a voting majority. You have this possibility you could swing, the momentum of any city. I was under the personal belief that St. George and a couple of cities in southern Utah for sure needed a change of guard, if you will. And so I was like, I'm going to get active in this. This is normally the least amount of participation in elections is in this municipal election, right? So
it's nonpartisan.
Yeah, it's nonpartisan.
People can't pick Republicans, so they're not really sure what to do.
Exactly. And it's like you end up with all these signs, but there's no, especially in St. George, there's no outlet to go learn about the candidates. And then you got to get in, if you're not in the club, you don't get invited to the meet and greets. And if you're not on this Facebook group or that Facebook group, you just get left out, right? So yep. I'd already made this conscious effort, but then the special election popped up and I was like, oh shoot, I want to, figure out what's going on with the Republican Party. I had a hell of a time just finding who my delegates were in Ivins. I'm like, I went to a meet and greet and I was like, can somebody tell me who my delegates are for Ivins 6? I was like, I know what district I'm in, but I don't even know where to find. And I sent 3 emails to the party asking specifically to get a list of the delegates. How long ago
was this?
This was right before the debates.
This year?
This year.
Okay. So Lisa Sanderson's the party chair.
So I send the message out, no responses. Okay. Go to a meet and greet. I ask the question. Finally, I reach out to Michelle Tanner. Mm-hmm. Okay.
She's fairly responsive.
I'm like, hey, will you help me? And I'd already done an interview with her, like, right. So, and I'd already been kind of engaged and I got invited to that meet and greet to meet, Bill Hoster, right?
I think it's Holster, but
Holster.
It could be Hoster. I don't know. I'm a libertarian. Remember, I don't know these people.
I know. So I got invited to that. I asked that question, and finally I get an email, and it legitimately says, "Don't share this list." And I won't tell you who sent it to me. It wasn't Michelle. I won't tell you who sent it to me, but it said, "Don't share this list."
It's just a delegate list?
It's a delegate list.
And they're all worried about privacy.
I guess.
Probably because campaigns spam delegates like you can't believe.
But
not only that, like the parties kind of hold their list tight so that they can, they're required to be neutral, but privately they can be more helpful to some than others.
So there's like this barrier of entry, right? And so I'm like, well, Like, how much effort would you have to go in? Like, you have to really be serious to go and get the information to be able to say, hey, I met this person and this person, and I'd love for you, on my behalf, would you vote for this person when you go to the delegate caucus? So it was just such a strange thing because I'd never had that before, because I'd never really, I was a political science major, but when I moved here, my wife and we had young kids, and I had legitimately, I pulled out of the whole political. I was like, I'm in a one-party state. I voted in the big elections, the city elections. I just wasn't up to date enough. I wasn't from here, so I just didn't know the ins and outs. And my focus was on business and my young family, right?
Yep.
Which happens a lot. That's just this middle that gets left out.
Absolutely.
And so in making this change and realizing, hey, okay, I'm the adult in the room now. I can't claim to be the kid anymore, and just take the old. Well, I'm new. I don't know what I'm doing, right? I can't use that excuse anymore, right? So even in taking it serious,
that excuse always works. By the way, it doesn't
forever.
Matter. It doesn't matter how new you are.
Like, I had a guy who was like,
"Sure, why not? You don't understand what's going on. That happens. I remember I was there once." Like,
well, yeah,
it works. People that are acting good faith, they will always accept. I'm new, and I don't know what's going on. With respect.
So, but I had to push. I had to push and push to see, just to start figuring out the system. But then you think about somebody coming in here from another state that doesn't quite understand how it happens, but they want to engage. They immediately scream conspiracy or corruption, because immediately it feels corrupt. It feels like there's no opportunity to where they have voice, and then they just say, to hell with it, and they throw their hands up. And I saw a survey where 50% of St. George residents do not know who Michelle Randall is, who's the mayor. 50%. Polled 400 St. George residents. It was 47%.
Wow.
47% of those 400 likely voters, right? It was through a campaign company. Likely voters didn't know. And I asked the surveyor. I said, "Hey, is this pretty typical?" He's like, "Yeah, it's kind of typical of a lot of cities." So we're not unique in that 50%, but it just shows the disengagement of local, like what's happening at the local level. And this party system. So when did you transition from going, okay, I was Republican, and let me sidebar this. 2019 and 2020, it was like it shattered networks. It just blew up all networks,
yep.
Right? So you have whether it was
it dramatically expanded my network. We were like, yeah, we're essential. You got laid off, come work for us. Because we're an online shipper is like a primary core part of our business. We're a fulfillment center. And they're like, well, people still need stuff.
Yeah.
And so we were like, okay, well, we're essential. So sorry you lost your job. Come take a warehouse job for us.
Yeah, we'll help
you to work. No problem.
Well, but thinking of like
everywhere else, it seemed like everybody just completely disconnected their social ties.
Yeah, their social networks all exploded, right? So as a real estate agent, we saw it at the Washington County Board of Realtors, just zero participation, almost for 3 full years. This has been the first year where I've looked around at the meetings. I was like, oh, okay, I think it's back to normal now, right? Like 3 full years, but all these networks just got obliterated. And we saw it at Keller Williams, where we were at the time we were the largest brokerage in the county, and when everything kind of got disconnected, we didn't ever really even close our offices. But it was like, meetings got kind of broken up, and then these regularly scheduled dinners and things got kind of postponed, or people didn't show up because they didn't feel comfortable doing it, right? So all of a sudden, all these social networks just disintegrated. So what happened in the Republican Party sounds like it's what happened to everybody. But now piecing things back together. The Republican Party
was fighting. Like there was again,
and they still
factions. So they were fighting over whether or not we should still gather. Right.
It's crazy.
Like we had a virtual convention, we had virtual state central committee meetings, and we were pushing back. So I actually, we pushed back to get together. I remember in May of 2020, we were done with it. My group that I was part of was done with this whole, hey, look, let's go lock ourselves in our house and hide from the scary,
boogeyman
cold, So we were pushing for in-person meetings again, but they're like, yeah, but you're not going to wear a mask. You're out there saying no more masks. I was like, right. This is silly. Let's do it outside.
Yeah. Yeah.
I own acres and acres of land across the state. Let's pick one up.
And the sun's shining.
And I'll put up pavilions and we'll go out in this anyway. So there was that. And then Eric Moutsos was like, hey, we need to have this Utah business revival. Let's go have a concert. And he started in Utah County and they got shut down. And he went to Twilly. He was going to do it on a farm. And the sheriff blockaded the roads and stuff and stopped him. And so I got together with the county commissioners, the mayors, the sheriff, the county health official in Iron County and said, we're going to have this concert. And we had the first post-COVID concert. Colin Ray flew into Cedar City. He performed a concert. We had 4,000 people there. The health department reported a week later, we can't track a single case of COVID spread to that event. Get over it. Because the media was like, oh, these dangerous people out there killing grandma. Oh, anyway, so
we lost our damn mind. But I did. But I'm counting on you to help us bring it back.
That's okay. Brad. So in the Republican Party, what I saw is the legislature was pushing up the timelines, and they were making it so that the convention wasn't the access to the Republican Party's primary. So the party itself didn't get to say this is a good candidate, because all you had to do was gather signatures, and you could force your way into the primary. And then the Republican Party, they're tied by neutrality in their bylaws and constitution, so they can't say, if you ran as a Republican and you won the primary, regardless of whether or not the mechanisms of the party that are designed to create that due diligence, regardless of that, they have to support you because you're the nominee.
Yeah.
And it disjointed the social mechanism that happens in the Republican Party. It disjointed the specialization that makes Republicanism functional.
It backfired.
And so the party's disjointed about that. And as they kept moving the timelines up, the chair kept assuming the powers that the SEC was given in the Constitution and the bylaws to actually govern the party, because the SEC is the representative body. It's the legislative body of the party, right? It's
SEC.
like the State Central Committee.
Okay.
It's like the House of Representatives.
Okay, got it.
Right? So the delegates elect a chairman, and he's the executive. But the State Central Committee is the people's house, essentially, in the Republican Party.
Got it.
And it has the most authority, the same way Congress has the most authority, but they keep delegating it to the executive. When I say delegating, what I mean is relegating. They give up their power just out of laziness or because they don't want to be accountable.
Or they can't agree.
And, well, I mean, that's part of the process. I mean, it's meant to run slow so that really when everybody agrees, we can actually get something done.
Yeah.
But when there's significant dissent, we shouldn't get something done.
Yeah.
Like, that's okay. That's part of the process.
Yeah.
That's a safeguard.
Maintain.
That's a feature, not a bug.
It's a feature. I appreciate that.
So the same thing was happening in the Republican Party, and they just kept giving more power to the executive. I'm like, hold on a minute. All of us are complaining that Congress does this, and that's what's wrong in the world.
Yeah.
And we're doing the same thing.
Yeah.
That's not okay. And they were like, well, we're going to pass a resolution because Romney voted against Trump, and we're going to pass a resolution hating on him and throwing shade his way. And I'm like, okay, that's cool. Now, can we get back to the actual business of the party, making the party stronger, vetting our candidates, giving the delegates and the neighborhood representation system a bigger voice so that people that actually care, people that, I don't know how this podcast goes out, people that actually give a shit are actually getting the ability to use their voice.
Yeah. You can say whatever you want.
Okay, thanks. I was raised at a plumbing supply house. I don't know if I covered that yet.
No.
Nothing is sacred among plumbers.
Yeah. I went to a military school. My dad was 30 years Army, and it started at a young age.
And I'm a libertarian, so colorful language is encouraged.
It's encouraged.
In the Republican Party, maybe not so much. And I'm now appealing to Republicans, so I should watch it. But
you digress.
The party, State Central Committee, the governing body of the party, had lost everything that made it useful.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, well, if we don't have a legislature of the people in the party, and it's all just being run by the executive, who is being led around by the nose, by the legislature and the elitists and the meddlers in the state, what am I doing here?
Yeah.
And it was tough. So I almost rage quit. So that morning I learned that one of my employees in the Philippines had got COVID. And his friends who were pharmacist technicians had given him a ventilator to use at home.
Oh, no.
And it was progressing to the point where they admitted him to the hospital. In the Philippines, when you go to the hospital, you're a prisoner of the hospital system until you're first better and then second your bills paid. And it bankrupts virtually every family that gets their loved ones in the hospital. It's a messed up system.
Yeah, they have a weird insurance system too. There's like a weird.
And he had two insurances. He works for me. We have company insurance, and they were like, "Oh,
but
this
then
guy,
like if they're
this guy is a programmer and he works for a U.S. company," and they basically extorted us through him. And
oh my gosh,
they charged him 1 million pesos to get out of hospital, which is about $20,000. I
was going to say I don't know what the exchange rate is.
Which is several years' income for the average Filipino. Even though he's a programmer and he makes U.S. wages, basically, it was a year's wages for him if he didn't put any money in rent and food. I mean, it was like a year's gross pay for a Filipino. And he was like, I can come up with a third.
Yeah.
And so we're like, okay, well, we're going to loan you a third and then we're going to give you a third and we'll get you out. And so we bailed him out. And that happened that morning. I went to the State Central Committee, and the last thing that the State Central Committee had been allowed to do was pick the convention date and venue. And the chair's like, no, it moves too slow. I need to just be able to pick unilaterally. And I was like, okay, well, then we're good for nothing. Like, all we can do is pass resolutions. We don't actually have any authority anymore. We're not actually representing the people anymore. This is a waste of my time. And I got up and walked out.
Yeah.
And I said, I'm leaving. I've been called a libertarian my whole life. I guess it's time to own that I'm a rhino and that I belong in a different party. And I left. I joined the Libertarian Party. And it was my goal to continue to pursue, what I've been doing in Iron County for years already, which was field strong libertarian candidates. Yeah. Now, I had done that from the Republican Party because Ronald Reagan said libertarianism is the heart and soul of the Republican Party. And I own that. And I have been running libertarian candidates in office in Iron County for a number of years, and we've got 12 or 13 elected. And I just decided, look, they're actually going to have an L by their name now instead of an R. And the Republican Party is so weak, and it's been so factioned that they need strong competition, that they have to actually go to that direction to make up for it. Right now, as they weaken, they lean to the left to try and pick up some of the moderates so that they can continue to win elections, which is their priority. Well, I want to have strong competition on the right, or the pro-liberty. I mean, I'm doing the founder spectrum of right and left, like left being total control and right being total anarchy.
Right.
And so
correct.
I want them to lean to the right. Mm-hmm. Correct. I just got that. I was like, wait, why did you? Yeah,
right.
I got you. Thank you. So,
left,
correct.
right or left?
Yeah.
Correct.
Accurate.
Yes.
Agreed.
Understood.
So anyway, so I wanted to create strong competition on the right for the Republican Party to have to lean that way and actually get their house in order to compete. And if they can't get their house in order, if they can't push back against the legislature, which they have the authority, they have the name. Everyone in the House and Senate in Utah needs, not everyone, 85% need the Republican Party to back them officially for them to get elected. The Republican Party has the power, and they're not wielding it. And they're not using the weapons that they have been given by the people.
I've heard this a couple of times from a couple of different areas of the country too. Is that this isn't even just a Utah thing. This is a Republican Party systemic issue. Is that you have this authority, yet they're not wielding it the way that they could be.
It's the same way Congress has the authority, and they're not wielding it. The Constitution gives them the greatest weapon against government encroachment ever known to man, and they will not wield it.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I left the Republican Party. I joined the Libertarian Party, and I just decided I would just field candidates. Well, that was great. Well, then last year I was going to run against the Senate Majority Leader, who is the senator from Iron County, Evan Vickers. I was going to run against him, and I started texting. I was texting Mike Lee and saying, hey, look, here's my plan. I'm a libertarian. I'm going to run. I'm going to show everybody the Republican Party's messed up by defeating basically the power broker in the Senate. And that'll send a big message. And he was like, right, but how are you going to do that? And I was like, well, I'm going to get out there. I'm going to spend $1 million on a campaign. And I'm going to show everybody that because of the way that politics has been messed up, the Republican Party isn't actually putting forward good candidates frequently. And they've become lazy in their effort to actually reach out to the public. And they're not actually representing us, and they're actually weakening the Republican Party while claiming to be Republicans. And he was like, right, but how are you going to convince the voters? You have limited time, and it's a big message.
Yeah.
So Mike Lee actually talked me out of that, which was kind of a shock. He and I are friends. He's been called a libertarian forever. He and I are like-minded that way. Well, so
his strategy, he's just trying, I think he's thinking strategy wise, maybe that's not the best effort at the moment, or do you think it's trying to protect?
He wasn't trying to protect Evan Vickers. If there's been one ally,
I was going to say the party, just like the party.
If there's been one ally with me in the Republican Party in this fight to actually correct the party, Mike Lee would be it.
Yeah.
And anyway, so he talked me out of it, and it was disheartening. And then Chris Stewart resigns all of a sudden. I get this feeling. I'm like, holy cow, this creates this weird perfect storm. As long as like Greg Hughes doesn't run.
Yeah.
Right. That was my, so
Jordan Hess had something to say about that.
So then, I was like, I'm not sure I want to. And all my friends are like, this is it for you. This is it. And then I started getting text messages from national politicians that apparently knew my plan with Vickers, and they were saying, this is your chance. And many of them were in the Republican Party, and they're like, this is your chance, run. And then I started getting leadership in the Republican Party telling me, this is your chance, you need to run, like, help us fix this. And so I ran.
Yeah.
And I've had crazy weird support from all of the most conservative parts, and people that I thought were party over principle are really principle over party. And the Republican Party has just been their vehicle. And so I ran as Libertarian because I want to fix the Republican Party, or I want it to fail and be replaced by the Libertarian Party. I think that if they can't get their house in order.
Do you think it's possible to have another third party? Because this is my thought. Okay, and you're laughing if you're listening. He's laughing at me because it's such an ideal. Because what ends up happening, right? So this is the way I understand it. The having a third party means you lose enough to give basically the left, the Democrats, right? Because if it's getting split off from the Republicans, you lose the ability to win in a head-to-head battle because you've just split the ticket in half on the one side, and the other side can now.
You're right, especially in this race. It's expected that Kathleen Repeal get 25 to 30% of the vote.
I'm arguing that there's enough on the left that have had enough of what's going on the left where they're like, nah, I think I can.
I think I can skip. There are 38 states in the union that are considered one-party states because the state culture has determined that either the Republicans are crazy
probably a little bit of it,
or the Democrats are crazy. And there's a lot of independents in those states, but generally one party runs their legislature. Generally one party gets elected to Congress. And if you can show them the viability of another option, the Libertarian Party doesn't become the third party. It becomes the second party in those states.
Yeah, fair enough.
And the party that right now is shunned in those states becomes the third party.
Yeah.
And so nationally, sure, you have three parties that are like competing for interests. But in the states, you have two. In 38 states, you have two. You have either the Republicans and Libertarians or the Democrats and Libertarians.
That's a good point. Okay.
And in Utah, it would be the Republicans and the Libertarians. And guess what? If Libertarians were perceived, if people knew that Libertarians could win, there would be a lot of Republicans that would join the Libertarian Party because they're sick of the Republican Party. They're sick of the status quo. They're sick of saying the right things and not actually making progress. And in my opinion, all it takes for that is to have the right message and the right endorsements.
Yeah.
And the right endorsements don't come for 3 more weeks.
Because they gotta wait till after the primaries.
Yeah, I mean, they have their primary candidate that they like, all of the big endorsements. With one exception, I talked to Ron Paul's people yesterday, and I think I might get his endorsement before that. But I haven't got it yet, so there's that. I do have Ryan Bundy's endorsement. I have Ammon Bundy's endorsement. Now, some people, that's like, yeah, you're a crazy libertarian. Eric Moutsos has endorsed me. Michelle Tanner is talking about it. She's waiting until the primary, but I think she has vocalized on social media several times that I'm her preferred pick.
Yeah. Well, she's got issues with the way the Republicans rolled out the candidate and the primary and that whole election process. I think she's highlighting the fact that there's issues there. I think she has a strong belief in having the candidate live within the district, which part of me has a hard time necessarily having that be a reason why you would vote for somebody if they live on this certain street or something like that. But
being one of you, I mean. Being of
the
district,
being of the district versus living in the district, and what does that mean? And how long did you live there? And have you been baptized in the waters of the Virgin River or whatever?
I was born in Moab, so I wasn't born in the district. Although I think maybe Moab was part of District 2.
So I'm gonna put this to the side because I don't necessarily think it's that important. However, I do agree. I was like, out of the candidates, you were the first one that jumped out to me. I was like, I want to know more about him. So let's talk about.
Sure. So hang on. So I told you I used to be on a 3-hour radio show. So you've realized now how verbose I am. So
I know I think we got another 30 minutes.
Okay.
We're 30, 40.
So the question you asked
maybe
is, what's the Libertarian Party platform?
Mallory's on the other side. She's like, no.
In the Libertarian Party nationally, they've got a lot of ideas that they put in their platform, and generally they're saying the free market should govern this. Capitalism is good. Competition is good. Government should butt out.
Yeah.
And other than it should protect common borders.
Yeah.
And in the state Republican Party, it's like 3 paragraphs I'm sorry. See, I've been in the Republican Party.
That's all right.
In the state Libertarian Party, they've kept their platform super short, and they said, we think government should be super small. And as a result, we think political parties should have very little say. Government should have little to say, and so should we. So essentially, they're like, we think that the government should. They actually don't talk about it. I'm trying to remember exactly how they say it. They're like, we think people should be free to interact with one another.
Is Jeff here?
Government enforcement.
I don't know if Jeff is here.
No.
Okay. I was going to have him bring it up right here, but that's all right.
That's okay. So essentially, it's super small. And the concept of it being super small is we think government should do very little. And that's really our platform. And historically in the National Party.
Hold on, let me back up. It's not necessarily that they should be doing little in terms of what they are doing, right? Like I think there's this idea that the government shouldn't do very much. Well, who's going to take care of the streets, right? Or how are we going to empower the police? Or you know what I mean? Like there's we get to these extremes, right? And we have a hard time. We keep bringing up Michelle. She might as well just been here. So she had this. There's this post about like
on her podcast next week.
Fake conservatives versus real conservatives, right? And I'm like, okay, well, we've ruined conservative. We've ruined the name conservative already as it is, but we've ruined liberal. We've ruined all the words, right? We've made them words that they historically used to mean something and now they don't.
Yep.
So when you're talking about limited government, it's more of a limited government. You're saying the government should do a really good job at a few really important things.
Yep.
And allow the people and organizations outside of that to not be bound, right? Have the organization be bottom up, not top down, right?
Yep.
Okay.
So I have a really interesting comparison. So I have a little citizens group that I run in Cedar City. We meet every week. I'm told it's the largest regularly meeting citizens group in the state. So about 3 years ago, we voted that we were going to do constitutional study at the beginning of the group. Prayer, pledge, mission statement, constitutional study. Basically, you read a section from the Constitution, you discuss it, and then you move on. Mm-hmm. So we did the United States Constitution, section, little bit at a time, paragraph at a time. It took a couple of months, right? Mm-hmm. And it was great. Everybody loved it. So we did it again. We got to the end of it, and they said, well, we really got to do the state constitution because we're basically saying we shouldn't be fussing with national politics. It's kind of a waste. Let's focus where we can make a difference on local politics. So we started reading the state constitution that way. That. We're in Article 7 after like 2 years.
Whoa.
The state constitution is massive. If you were to read it straight through like a book, it would be similar to a Harry Potter book. Like it takes you, I don't know, 8 or 10 hours. Maybe not a Harry Potter book, but a pretty big book. And the United States Constitution, including all of the amendments, 30 minutes, 35 minutes. It's not a big deal. And so brevity in rules is a critically important thing because if you have less things that you're doing, you can do them better.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that I love the way you said it. If you do a really good job at very few things, then you actually have a functional organization.
Yeah.
And in my opinion, and in the Libertarians' opinion, the federal government is involved in everything worldwide, many things that it shouldn't be involved in. What we really expect out of the federal government is to hold accountable, transparent, and accurate elections,
mm-hmm.
to make sure that we have a system of coinage that we can use so to make commerce work, to make sure that people are playing fair in commercial transactions, state to state, nationally, make sure that there's a fair treatment of market participation so there isn't allowed corruption or graft or force. And then other than that, generally protect our borders from invasion, violent invasion. And that's essentially, I mean, if you read the Constitution of the United States, there's 16 enumerated powers.
Mm-hmm.
And they really don't put a lot of focus on any of them.
Yeah.
But they put a whole lot of focus on foreign wars. They put a whole lot of focus on
pandering,
on pharmaceuticals, medicine, drugs,
mm-hmm.
tons of focus on drugs. They put a ton of focus on infrastructure projects, right? But remember, all of the infrastructure projects, well, 99.9% of infrastructure projects happen in a state that is supposed to be sovereign according to the 10th Amendment.
Yeah.
And those states should be doing those things. I mean, really the Interstate Commerce Act, like making a national road system so they could get tanks from coast to coast to quell uprising really changed the nature of federal government when it comes to infrastructure.
Yeah.
And in the state, they're involved in regulating everything. And then they're now, I mean, counties, they've always said local control is best. And it doesn't get more local than the individual, but now counties are being, their powers to protect their state is being stripped as well by the state.
Yeah. Well, and it's eroding, it's going from the state into the city, for sure, right?
Yeah. So the concept of libertarians is that we think the government should do a really great job at the things that it's supposed to be doing, and it shouldn't do anything else.
Yeah.
And what we really want is for people to be free to transact one another, and the government should be protecting that from force, coercion, graft,
mm-hmm.
theft, and fraud. And so that's the Libertarian Party platform.
Yeah, I think that was helpful.
In a nutshell.
So helpful. So helpful.
an hour and a half to get us there.
No, yeah, we need to go that.
That really is. I mean, that really is the conversation that I love to have, because it's the philosophical base.
Yeah.
Of all other conversations regarding the Libertarian Party and my candidacy.
Well, so how would, because there's two questions that really I wanted to jump out at, is that when you're dealing with, so looking at the state level, how we have this thick constitution, and as a libertarian, you're like, okay, well, where do we start with, how do we start trimming the hedge, if you will, right? And start saying, okay, where have we really gotten out of whack, and where do we need to get back on track? That's the state level. But you're running for Congress. We want you in DC. So when you get to DC, there's these big rocks that I think are pretty across the board, the talking points, right? There's mismanagement, financial mismanagement. We have an exploding debt issue that is specifically Congress's fault. As much as they'll put it on the executive, it has very little to do. It does in a lot of ways, because we have this, we've given a checkbook to let them spend money on foreign,
Congress still controls the power of the purse. They can and
do.
Should defund things.
They can and should. So that's a big one. We have, I think immigration is still a really important issue that, even though it's not necessarily the hot button item, I think it's something that needs to be focused on, especially knowing what we're at unemployment wise. We need humans to do jobs to keep the economy going, and we're sliding into a recession. No matter what, something's got to give, right? So I think that's an important one. What from your perspective, what are the important ones?
All right. So from my perspective, I do want to touch on another one. You brought up immigration. I'd love to touch on that because everybody has questions, because I'm a libertarian. Remember, my training came up in the Republican Party, but for me, money is the big one, because that was the control that the Constitutional Convention gave the people's house. Mm-hmm. They said, okay, you guys get to decide what gets funded. So really, if something else gets out of control and they're not letting you rein them in, you can defund them. Mm-hmm. Like, you're given that power. You don't like what the EPA is doing, and you can't get them to come back within the directive that they got as an agency. Stop giving them money, and all of their people will quit, and then they won't be able to carry out the thing that they're doing. And then if people want to keep their jobs, they'll go back to what they're supposed to be doing. It's like in my business. If somebody doesn't do what they're supposed to be doing, I can fire them. I can stop paying them. It's not like that guy, what is his name, Milton, in Office Space. Like, I didn't get my paycheck and you took my stapler. So and it's kind of like that. Congress can defund an organization, and they should. In my opinion, the way that the executive branch has got around that is in 1913, the 16th Amendment was passed. And the 16th Amendment created the progressive income tax, where the federal government could come into the states and tax the people directly who were citizens of those sovereign states. And it changed the narrative of the federal government. Huge, dramatically bigger than anybody could have considered maybe at the time. Maybe there were some smart people that understood that. But there is a significant reason why it was set up that way, and that was so that Congress would continue to control the budget so that they could defund overreach. And there is an effort right now. So I got out there and I said, look, I want to repeal the 16th Amendment. I want to get rid of the income tax. I want to abolish the income tax. And everybody's like, whoa, that's a huge idea. And you're going to be a freshman halfway through another person's term. There's no way you're going to get that done, especially because you're a libertarian and you're not going to be on anybody's party. And Ted Cruz is running a bill through the Senate right now that abolishes the income tax. And there's a lot of support for it. Before 1913, the federal government used to have to pass a budget, something they haven't done in a lot of time, several decades. They used to have to pass a budget and then go to the states asking to pay for that budget. They used to have to go begging to the states for money. And now what happens is the states go to the federal government begging for money. So what we have is our taxpayer money at the state level lobbying taxpayer money at the federal level to pay for things that the states want, not necessarily the people. And the people get screwed in the process. And so you abolish the income tax is my number one thing. It also forces Congress to pass a budget which empowers them to defund the agencies that are overreaching. And so I think you solve the fiscal responsibility problem. I mean, it'll be a little chaotic for a while. Don't get me wrong. As a whole bunch of federal employees flood onto the private market, it'll get a little bit crazy. But
so thinking about when you make these big, when we have these big changes, I keep hearing this. I'll use this as a local example because there's a GO bond that's for a general obligation bond to fund parks, right? An expansion of the parks in St. George, right? And I'm like, I get that it's not going to change what you're paying right now. This is the main driver. I said,
they're replacing another bond because
they're replacing this one's expiring, right? So they said, well, it's best to reignite this thing because it's expiring now. Where next year, if you let it go and they have
taxes went up,
they're going to notice the taxes go, or we're going to have to talk about how the tax goes.
20 years ago, when they passed the current bond, everybody expected their taxes would go down after it. But now you're used to the taxes, and so let's pass another one so you don't notice.
And truthfully, I think the citizens, like the local population, they love the parks. I love the parks. They love the trails, and I think they're willing to pay for that. We have some of the lowest tax rates in the state as far as our city goes. So if you look at this, there's pros and cons to both. It depends on what the city values, but they get a vote on it, right? They get to have like this specific thing where they get a vote on. But it's funny to me how this fear of, well, this would be so much more difficult, and you would expect all these people have to all agree on this big huge thing, and there's all this fear on the end. So we don't want to upset the turnip truck because then I might not get reelected. So thinking about these big pushes, this is what it's going to take, though. This is going to take the political fortitude to do it. Is you got to have people in there that know what they're doing, that have the spine to do it, that know that it might not necessarily be a popular thing, but it's the best thing in the moment if that's true.
If you want to change the status quo, or if you want the status quo to change, you have to change it. Like, honestly,
you got to make the leap.
If you want your life to be different, you have to let your life be different.
Yeah.
And it seems so fundamental, so basic, so nonsensical to even say it. But a lot of people want change. They're not willing to change to get it.
To get what you've never had, you have to do what you've never done.
Boom.
Right?
Boom.
So
Dave Ramsey says, if you want to live like no one else, you have to live like no one else.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
So when we think about this, repealing an amendment to the Constitution, what's the requirement?
Repealing, it's not that hard. So, I mean, it's not that easy. Difficult. I'm sorry. It is hard. It's not that difficult. So the system itself is simplicity. It's just a bill that runs through Congress. And when it passes both houses, it gets ratified by the states. And it has to be ratified by 3/4 of the states. It's a super high threshold. However, that's good. That's how you ensure that it's what people want, right? People, pretty much everybody should agree on something if it's going to become a law. That's the whole design of the system. To protect the people from overreach. The executive branch doesn't care. Hey, look, we have the power. We're going to do it whether you like it or not. That's the reason why legislative is supposed to do it.
So we have mounting debt.
Yep.
We cut the income tax. So that means revenue at the federal level goes down. Isn't that going to just make the whole problem
worse? It goes
worse?
down almost 100%. Do you know how the federal government used to fund itself before 1913?
How?
They would pass a budget. They would take the census enumeration and they would say, okay, Utah, you have 2% of the nation's population. Our budget is $8 trillion. 2% of $8 trillion is
a lot.
160 billion. And that's your portion of the federal expenditure. You owe us. They send them a bill.
Send them a bill.
Utah, your bill is 160 billion. Now that does two things. First of all, it allows Utah to decide the best way that it can raise the money. And I don't know if you knew this, but there's more oil in Utah than in the Middle East. It's just in shale. And it's all locked up in federally claimed lands.
And you need fracking to get it out, which there's a lot of anti-fracking.
Alaska, that's how they used to pay their portion pre-1913. They used to pay the federal income tax, and their people were completely outside of it. They paid it with resources.
Yeah.
And
they pay their people. They pay people to live there.
They do now. So when federal income tax passed, their people are like, holy crap, we have to pay for taxes? Like, we're citizens of this state. Like, we shouldn't have to pay for the federal taxes. And so Alaska said, okay, don't worry about it. What we're going to do is we're going to take the money that we were taking out of our resources and sending the federal government, and we're just going to give it as a dividend to the citizens of our state. Like, that was why Alaska pays people to live there, is because it was a way of offsetting this kind of injustice that the income tax created. And so that's what would happen in the 16th Amendment. So the federal government would get funded by the states in enumeration of the census, which punishes essentially the population having lots of people, like Congress rewards lots of population. So it's actually like this. You have to pay money for your representation. Taxation with representation. Yeah. Go figure. Go figure. So anyway, that's how it used to be done. Now, you tell me this. If the states had to come up with the budget payment by enumeration, if they're the ones that had to pay the federal budget, do you think some of the influential people in the states would be fighting against federal spending?
100%.
All of them. The legislature, it would be their most important issue.
Yeah.
Let's lobby the legislature in D.C. to spend less money so the legislature in Salt Lake doesn't have to raise as much.
Does
that sound like a winning combination
sounds
to
like
you?
Winning. It sounds perfectly winning.
And that was how the founders envisioned it, and that was how they set it up, and Woodrow Wilson screwed it up.
Well, there's if you haven't read The Creature of Jekyll Island, I highly recommend you reading the book Creature of Jekyll Island and the creation of the Federal Reserve, but can't say that there's not a...
The Federal Reserve happened in the same year. The Securities and Exchange Commission happened in the same year. Of course, the IRS happened in the same year. 1913 was a dark year for freedom in the history of this country.
The banking industry took over the country.
So that's my number one issue. Number two issue for me is public lands. I already referenced it a little bit. The federal government claims land in states all over the place, especially west of the Mississippi. The interesting thing is when they were arguing about how to build the Constitution, the colonies at the time during the Articles of Confederation, the majority of them were claiming all of the land west of their state, right? Like they had their borders. If you look, a lot of those colonies had straight lines north and south. They carried those on coast to coast.
Right.
Now, they didn't know how far it was coast to coast.
But they just said forever that way.
On these parallels,
yeah,
everything to the next ocean is ours.
That's ours.
And Maryland was like, well, hold on a minute, we're landlocked.
Yeah,
we're giving up 10 miles squared for the seat of this new federal government. Right? Like we're giving up the land for DC out of our state. You guys can't claim all of this acreage for yourselves just because of some parallels on a map. That land should be used for future states, and they should have equal footing with us. And we will not, and there was a ton of population in Maryland. We will not agree to this new Constitution unless you agree that that land belongs to future states and will have equal footing with us.
Interesting.
And the colonies all agreed to that, and it was enshrined in the Constitution. The wording's a little clunky. Ken Ivory can explain it to you. If I had the Constitution here, I could show it to you. I do have one in my truck, but I didn't bring it in with me.
Unprepared, Brad.
Yeah, it happens. Anyway, so they call that the equal footing doctrine. Some people call it a Maryland Compromise. I'm not as
okay. Now you say Maryland Compromise. Now it's starting to remember it in my head.
It's the constitutional directive for it is new to me. What isn't new to me is that federal land claims in the state of Utah have really hurt our economy. And it's happened throughout the West, and the federal government is not allowed. It is unconstitutional for them to claim lands in our states. They're allowed land for forts, military forts, ports, military installments, administrative buildings, and then the 10 miles squared of Maryland. That's all the Constitution allows them. It's Article 1, Section 8, Subclause 17 specifies that. And yet they claim 92% of Garfield County. No wonder Garfield County is the poorest county, maybe in the nation.
Yeah, you're probably pretty close, unless there's some obscure county in Nevada that is also owned primarily by the government.
Right.
I would say even Washington County, only 11% of our whole county is privately owned.
Yep.
So we're at 11%, and we actually are rich in...
It's unconstitutional, and the Constitution was designed to be a shield or a weapon used by the people and by the states to restrain the federal government from overreach. And
tyranny.
We have lost our knowledge of how to use it, and we've lost our backbone in actually trying to use it. And in my opinion, if you had and I know that there's an effort in the state of Utah. I know this because Ken Ivory has pushed for it for 12 years. And he finally withheld money because the legislature can do that. He withheld money from the Attorney General's office until they actually hired somebody to fight that battle, because the legislature in Utah voted several years ago, hey, look, we're going to sue the federal government for our land. And they wouldn't do it. They said, okay, yeah, we're going to do it. And they said, we need more money to do it. And so the legislature keeps giving the Attorney General's office more money, and then they're not doing it. So this last session, they actually withheld money from the Attorney General's office. And the Attorney General came down and said, hold on a minute, we need our money. And they're like, okay, look, we're not going to give you your money until you actually make some progress on this front. So they went out and they put out an RFP for legal counsel. And they actually now have hired legal counsel to fight Utah's battle against the federal government for our land. And the federal government has to have, if Utah's going to win, they need somebody in the federal government that actually agrees with that fight and is willing to use their bully pulpit in Congress to fight for that fight. And I want to be that guy.
Yeah.
And I have no problem using a bully pulpit. I have no problem spending all of my time talking with people and trying to negotiate things. Sure, I'll be a freshman in Congress, but let me put this idea forward to you. What do you think happens if the first libertarian in United States history gets elected to Congress? What do you think is unique about that person's influence when he gets into office?
Well, I imagine that it's a spotlight. It's
a huge ripple because both parties are going, holy cow, we have a new threat.
Yeah.
And they may treat me like the Republicans treat AOC, and like the Democrats treated George Bush and Donald Trump. They'd be like, this is horrible, because this guy's fighting against everything that we hold sacred. He's killing all of our sacred cows.
But think of all of the people. Look at all the
brisket.
people that it's like breaking a glass ceiling. Think of all the people that are like, I don't think I can make it, or that they talk to the Mike Lees that are like, are you sure you want to go put all your eggs in this basket, right? Is that really the smart decision? But you break that ceiling down, and there's this belief, right? It's the 5-minute mile, right? There's all these examples of like, we just have to get past this one milestone to say, hey, this is a possibility. There's reality here. And if you believe that you want change, you have to go change our behavior. We have to get out there and do it.
Yep. If Utah elects me to Congress.
When? I don't know. I'm just trying to be positive for you.
That's fine. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I appreciate it. When Utah elects me to Congress, it will create this huge ripple in the pond. Utah will become the most influential swing state in the nation for next year's partisan elections. Because remember, this is a special election. It's one of only 2 partisan elections in the nation this year.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, we go into a presidential election year, and Utah is the most influential state on the partisan stage because there's this new movement that happened that everybody thought was impossible. And Utah has now moved up their presidential cycle so they can have a presidential primary to try and have more influence on Republican Party primary.
Yeah.
In reality, that's what the legislature is trying to do. And now all of a sudden, not only are we influential in the Republican Party primary, but we have a libertarian that we elected from the state. And if the Republicans don't get it right, then we're going to lose it all the libertarians. And we're going to have 2 new parties in the state. We're going to have the Libertarian Party and the Republican Party that's pretending.
Yeah.
And the other 38 states that are one-party states all of a sudden have the exact same composition. And the political makeup of American politics changes.
Yeah.
Overnight. Now, it's not necessarily because of me, but it's because of the concept of having something that we thought was impossible is actually possible. What else might be possible?
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, it is possible to repeal an amendment. It is possible to change this trajectory that we're on of bankruptcy.
Yeah.
It is possible to actually have world peace. It's possible to bring all of our troops home from protecting other people's borders and actually protect our borders.
Yeah. And give them the support and aid they need when they come home.
Yeah. Did you know that when Ron Paul ran for president, he received the largest number of donations from active service members of any president in history?
I didn't know that.
And everybody's like, oh, but you're a non-interventionist. You're an isolationist. And he's like, the active service members love me because I'm telling them that if we're not actively at war defending the country, they should be closer to their families.
Yeah. We got plenty of jobs for them.
Yeah.
We got plenty of jobs for them.
And I'm of that same opinion. I think that we should have some strategic locations. Like I have an office in the Philippines. The Philippines is a strategic location for air bases.
Yeah.
We don't necessarily need 20,000 troops there.
Yeah.
But we need an air base there that we can somehow protect.
We're terrified of a country that has almost 0 military bases outside of their borders. Terrified. We're absolutely terrified.
Yep.
It blows my mind.
We should defend our borders and project strength and liberty for the world. Because realistically, it is not the war machine that keeps the world safe and free. It's people trying to pursue what's best for them and their family. And that only happens, other than with tyrants that pursue their family's interests through war. Mm-hmm. The vast majority, 99.9% of the world only progresses in their family and their own personal development in peace.
Yeah.
Peacetime is required for development, and we need to incentivize peacetime.
Yeah.
And an easy way to do that is to bring our troops home, have them actually defend our border, have them spend time with their family, and have us spend less money taking it from everybody else that's trying to improve their lives by spending money on our military being far overseas.
Yeah.
And so that has nothing to do with public land, but that is a significant interest that I have in DC. Yeah. My third issue, we talked about specifically about the power of the purse. I think we have co-equal branches of government for a reason. That separation of powers is critical. Congress has abdicated their authority, and what they should be doing is they should be enforcing the separation of powers by withholding money from executive branch agencies that are overreaching their authority, and they should be changing laws if they disagree with how the judicial branch ruled on them. And that separation of powers can be done very easily through the budgeting process, and people need to recognize when there is a government shutdown, if there's negotiation happening that's actually trying to progress us towards something sustainable, that shutdown is worthwhile. And it's going to be fear-mongering as they're going to close down parks and monuments instead of closing down things that we don't really need, instead of bringing aircraft carriers home to our bays. They're going to shut down the things we like to try and scare us into surrender.
Yeah.
Shutdowns, the resistance to those resolutions, the continued resolutions to keep funding government without actually passing a budget, those things are generally harmful.
Yeah.
Because we're not actually passing a budget. However, they can be used, and they're designed to be used to control the power of the purse so that we can actually have the house of the people that represents the people reining in the government that has become something it's not supposed to be.
Yeah.
And so that would be that. That is the core of my other beliefs. I think that if you actually were able to repeal the 16th Amendment, when you repeal the 16th Amendment, you're able to then have the states controlling the federal government to do what it's supposed to do. The legislature then has the power of the people to be able to rein in the executive branches. And we actually get back to a sustainable nation that can be a light on the hill, projecting peace through commerce and strength.
Yeah.
And that's the vision I have for the future. And I hope that Utahns in Congressional District 2 see that vision in me.
I see that vision in you, man. You got me. I can feel it across the table, man. I really do. You're passionate about it. I want to wish you the best of luck because you're just getting started. You're just getting started.
Yep. I'm keeping my powder dry for the most part.
There's a lot of there's been a lot of election conversation, at least in my head and locally, because primaries are happening right now, September 5th. However, November 21st is the election day, and you're on that ballot. You're not on the one that's in there. You're not on the one in the mailbox.
The sideshow that you see now, they're trying to get on the ballot with the big boys.
They're trying to compete with you. They're trying to get into your they're
trying to get into my arena.
Get to your level, right? Is what it is. So I want to wish you the best of luck. I'm hoping to have you on. I'd like to talk more about a bunch of different things, but I'm going to leave it here because I think you ended on the best note possible. Good luck to you.
So I have one more thing to add.
Oh, yes, please.
I didn't do any shameless self-promotion.
A little bit, but let's do it.
So if you want to know more about my campaign, you want to know more about me, you want to know more about my issues, you want to hear about me getting shot in a third world country and having to heal up in Brazil on my mission, go to bradgreenforutah.com. You want to really help my campaign?
bradgreenforutah.com or FOR.com?
I own all of the domains that are anything like that. And they all...
Go to the Googles.
I run websites and web fulfillment warehouses.
Nice. There you go.
Brad Green, Utah will get you there.
Brad Green, Utah will get you there.
So if really what my campaign needs to succeed, it needs social media engagement so that the word gets out, word of mouth through people you trust, and it needs donations. It doesn't need tons of money, although I'm happy to accept it. It needs lots of donors to show that I'm a viable candidate, because realistically what I'm going to need to win is I'm going to need endorsements of good people that are principle over party.
Yeah.
So that people can say, okay, maybe it's okay for me to leave the Republican Party that isn't getting it done for me, and go to somebody that has Republican reputation but Libertarian nomination.
Yeah, man. bradgreenforutah.com.
Yep.
Donate, follow, subscribe, do all those things. Join principle over party. Look at the facts. Learn about you. Your history, where you came from, your success in business, all those things. I think those are all important things, right? In deciding a candidate. But I think the most important thing is finding a candidate that's willing to stick up and stand up for the Constitution, be a great representative for us here locally in DC, in the swamp. You're going in with the Gators.
Yep.
You can handle it. I think you can handle it.
I can handle it. I don't like it there. I've been several times. I hate DC.
Yeah.
One of my biggest arguments is that we should actually move Congress back to their district. They should do remote sessions.
Yeah, why not?
So that it's easier for constituents to get to representatives than it is for lobbyists to.
That's a good point. I like it.
They should be voting from their district. It's silly. Maybe once a year they go spend a few weeks actually in the fancy palaces. Otherwise, they should be in their district meeting with people.
Yeah, I agree with you. All right, hey Brad, thanks for coming on. I'm gonna have you back. If you'll come back, I'll have you back, man.
Yep, we should work out a time. It's going to get really crazy here in about 2 weeks.
Yeah,
let's do it.
Let's do it.